Hi, welcome. My name is Amanda. For those of you that are new to the channel, for those of you who've been here before, welcome back, and to friends and family, g'day. So I have got myself 4 very large pieces of whole rump, and I need to break it into smaller pieces. So I thought I'd bring you along with me. I'm not doing this just for the sake of it. It's because I need to fit this into the freezer, and I can't fit 4 whole rumps the way that they are whole. 5 to 12 kilo rumps. They won't fit in my freezer, so I do need to break them down. I'm also showing my daughter, who's off camera, and I'm also showing family as well on how to go about breaking down the meat for myself, for that next generation, and the next generation afterwards. It's a great thing to know how to do. It's not intimidating. It can be a little bit intimidating when you first see such a large piece of meat, and you may not know how to manage it. So that's what I'm here to do, to try to help you through it and show you a few simple, easy steps, and to encourage you to go ahead and purchase some larger products. Like I do with a whole salmon, I do the same thing with a really big piece of beef. Mum always taught me when we were shopping for beef to look for the beef that had the yellow beef cap fat on it. Yellow meaning that the cow was of an older age, and so therefore it wouldn't be as tough the meat. And it also could mean in these days, in modern day terms, that the animals have been fed in a feedlot, and so they've been exposed to maybe a lot of corn, which can change the colour of the fat. And that is to mimic what my mum's generation always knew, which was the yellow fat or buttery fat cows were always the more tender meats when you were selecting your cut of meat. So I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by the yellow fat, and then we'll open up some bags. Now, if you are not interested, or you do not want to watch somebody breaking down very large pieces of meat, and that is perfectly okay, not everybody can do it or want to do it or would like to see it, this will not be the video for you. Future videos where I'm prepping the food into velveting them or preparing them to brine them, smoke them, turn them into pastrami, silverside, mince, all those kind of things, and marinating them, they might be better suited for you. But to actually watch me breaking down a very large piece of meat, repeatedly turning it over and doing all sorts of things to that piece of meat, perhaps this isn't the video for you. But for those of you who would like to know how to do it, and for the generation who are watching who do need to know how to do it as well, come along with me while I break down a couple of pieces of beef, and then we'll move on later on to the rest of it. First of all, let's have a look what Mum was talking about with the yellow fat cap on a whole big piece of rump. So this is a piece of rump. It's a 5 kilo piece, and the colour of the fat beneath the bag has this golden colour to it, or buttery colour to it. And that's the cut that my mum always preferred me to purchase instead of white fat. She always preferred me to purchase for her the golden colour, because she said it meant that either the cattle was an older cattle that had been used in this case, or it was just a more tender cut of beef. So I tend to go with those. You can get really yellow fat caps on your different meats if they are grain-fed, a lot of corn as well. So it does depend on what the animal has eaten. But when I have a selection of a lot of rumps available to me, then I would always search for these yellowy coloured, buttery coloured rumps. All right, so this is a 5 kilo piece of rump, all right? And it can be quite intimidating to people who are not familiar with how to manage such a big piece of meat. And so quite often they would prefer to go to a supermarket and buy steak that's already pre-cut, or roasts that are already cut for them, or go to a butcher or whatever to purchase them, okay? We break it all down. It's much easier and more economical. So this big piece of meat cost me $50. All right, so now I need to break it down into its sections. So the first thing I do is I prep my area. So I have a tea towel, clean tea towel. I have some paper towels, absorbent paper towels, and then I've got butcher's paper. And this makes cleanup a lot easier when you're working inside doing large amounts. If you've got a really big kitchen bench, then use that. I don't have big kitchen benches, so I work in the area that I can work in. And the butcher paper just makes things a lot easier, because there will be a little bit of blood as we move around. Don't need any special equipment other than a really good knife. Also, putting something beneath your board to stop it sliding around helps as well. All right, so in my case, red is blood. So any red meat products get cut on my red cutting boards, and they are bleached on a regular basis, okay? So they were being bleached yesterday in preparation for this. So sharp knife, that's one. Let me go get another. So I've got 2 knives, just got one longer one, then one shorter one. My steels, if I need to sharpen them, I've just checked them. They're both perfectly fine and don't need to be sharpened any further. Just taking off the bevels. Husband's already given them a good sharpen up, so they're already ready to go. So I will be using, this is my main knife that I like to use. So you can wear gloves if you want to. I'm not going to wear gloves. I'm just going to go wash up. Okay, so over a sink, preferably for those that are working in the kitchens. I'm in the nook. We need to open up this big Cryovac bag, okay, and get the blood off and dry off our beef afterwards. So I'm just going to simply do that, opening up my bag and just getting rid of all of the blood from this product, and then patting dry my piece of beef afterwards. Now, once again, there's no waste because the bag that's full of just beef blood will get tipped into the dog's dry food later today. And that'll be their snack. Alrightio. So our big piece of meat, which has been sitting in that lovely bag full of juices and blood and everything like that, it's too slippery to manage. So need to get rid of the surface blood on the beef to make it safer to handle. You can use a towel if you want to do a towel. I'm just doing it with some paper towel, and then I'm just going to tip it out onto my board, and then I can work with it. See, I told you it was handy to have all of the... Put your paper down. It's a big cut of meat, isn't it? But we can manage this. It's not that hard. Like I said, you can wear gloves if you want to. I like to feel where the beef tissue is as you're working it, you know. And we need to do some trimming. So we need some containers, which I've got, in order to do the removal of some of this fat. Okay, which is what happens when it's been removed and from the bone that was here. But all of this fat needs to be removed, and the easiest way is just to insert your knife beneath it and then come up and cut it away. Okay, and then peel it back. So if we're peeling it all back, it's good colour fat, you know, as my mum would say. This is what we're ending up with, this, which can be all used later on, and it will all get used. So there's a big vein of it that runs down between the connective tissue of just pure fat. So by just peeling it back and using your knife and just guiding your knife along, you can easily remove all of that fat, which is what we're going to do now. So just taking your time, try not to use a sawing method. Try to use the bevel of your knife and running your knife along the meat, if that makes sense. And then you'll end up with nice, smooth pieces of meat. This section here, we're going to open this up, and we're going to, you can press it out with your fingers as much as you can, and we're going to be taking off that piece, which is the rump cap, once I've finished trimming up all of this excess amount of fat and sinew. So there's a piece, quite a large piece. We'll get to that afterwards. Let's get the cap off. So there is a really big piece of meat here. This is called the cap, okay? And it's a beautiful, tender piece of meat, this piece here. It has another name, starts with P. Can't think of it. We've just always called it a cap. I will insert the name when I go and check it again, remember it. So that piece is going to get pulled off. We then have another section here which will have a fillet running through it, which we need as well. And we've also got some pieces that we will be chopping up and stir frying as we go. But let's get this cap off. And it's not difficult. Alrighty, so let me try to get you a little bit closer. So like I said, from beneath, if you lift it up, you can see this, literally run your hand along that before we even start using a knife, okay, and separating that muscle, okay, and rolling it around. Okay, so I'm not even using a knife at this stage. This is the easy part. Can use a knife, but you don't need to at this point. All right, and we're going to go, and this big piece here is the fat cap muscle that we need. All right, that's just some fat and skin, so we can cut there. And then rolling it down, we're just going to follow along that seam. Okay, and that's the first piece done. We'll get the big piece out of the way. And this is our cap. And it needs a big trim up because it's got an awful lot of fat on this one. All right, so this piece of connective tissue in here from the muscle wall needs to be removed because it's really tough, and when you cook your piece of meat, it will cause the meat to curl onto itself, giving you an uneven cook. Plus it also looks terrible, tastes terrible, and it's not very pleasant to chew on. So we're just going to remove this piece of silver skin. That's what we call this. So again, just using your knife flat up against the meat itself and just rolling it just to get rid of all of that connective tissue and make the cut a lot more tender. All right, and again, this especially here, if you can see this section, this is not edible. You would not be able to chew through all of that connective tissue. Okay, so we've definitely got to get rid of all of that. And as you see, you've got a beautiful piece of meat beneath it. But as it stands, if that was left on it, it would take hours of cooking to break that down, if that ever broke down. I don't think I've ever cooked with it, so I don't know whether you could break that down to make it palatable. All right, and just stripping it back and removing that excess piece of fat. Like I said, none of it is going to go to waste, all right? And then just trimming. Now, you can trim as much or as little or as not at all. It's up to you. This particular piece I'm going to be using later on when I'm doing some pastrami. Okay, so this particular piece is going to be getting brined, so I will be putting it away. So I do want to trim off some of this connective tissue, but not much of the fat on top. I want to keep the fat for the smoking process. So I'll just trim off a little bit. It's up to you. I mean, people will tell you fat is the flavour. So, you know, you don't want to take off too much of it. And as the meat cooks, the fat breaks down and it keeps the juices and it moistens that cut of meat. All right. So that's our first piece done. All right. Much easier to manage a piece this size. You can roll it and roast it if you want to. Do whatever you like with it. But that's the first and the most valuable piece from cutting that piece of rump off. And you can cut this into steaks very easily. Put it in the refrigerator or freezer until it is just starting to firm up, and then you'll be easily able to slice it into much thinner slices or cut it into steaks. Right, so this is the first one. We're going to move on to the next bit. We're going to get into the center of our beef. Put that aside because I need to get that in the refrigerator soon. All right, quick clean up. All right, next piece. All right, so now we're back to our big piece of beef. What do we do with this? Okay, same thing. There's a whole heap of this silver skin here that needs to be removed because, again, that will just curl. It's also really tough and horrible to chew through. There's nothing that you can really do with that piece. So we're just going to continue to trim our beef up until we get to a much more friendlier piece. Now, we are going to take out the fillet next of this particular one before we start moving it into steaks. So we still have some fat on top, but not a huge amount. We've taken most of that off with the cap. So once again, looking, there it is there. See this piece of connective tissue once again separating the different layers of muscle. Okay, and that's what you're looking for. And we're going to follow it down. And if you know anything about anatomy, you know that muscles have got this surface on them that is protected by this adipose tissue and this layering here. So without even using a knife for most of that process, I've been able to reveal this piece here, which is the next piece. All right, so, and we just want to follow that down. We are literally just going to be, which is why I said I like to use my fingers, because when you get to here, you're going to find a piece of connective tissue in the center, a really thick piece. And once you get to that, you need to then remove it. There it is there. Get it up. And this is a tendon. I know, it's descriptive, isn't it? Once you get to this tendon, you know that you're in the right place, all right? Because that's where we want to be. We need to get that out because that is not edible at all. I've gone through a few of these in my time, as in snapped them. Rightio. So this tendon layer needs to be removed, but that's where and then you can see the silver side part of it there, okay? And so that's what we're doing. We're running our knife all the way down, and we're going to dissect that. It's not that hard. It's okay. All right, that's the piece of tendon now gone. That's a definite into the dog's food. All right, and then we're just going to run the knife all the way down. Okay, see this piece of connective tissue? We're just following that. So we're just using the knife up against that and just letting it slide all the way down. Careful when you are cutting towards your hand. And if you are cutting towards your hand, roll it this way so that if you slip and you do cut, you're cutting into a muscle more than into the tendons that run down here. Just trust me, you don't want to be cutting your tendons. But just be careful. You can get a metal glove if you want to, a mesh glove. I got one, don't use it. I just find it easier to not use it. Alrighty, and then we just cut that down there. And we're going to clean all this up. That makes the best pieces of steak, or also really good as a roast or smoked, peppered. The list just goes on. But we'll trim this one up for steaks in a minute. This is the next piece that needs to be trimmed up. This is the middle of the rump. Again, there's a lovely medallion here, which is just as good as any thigh fillet that you buy if you treat it properly. So once again, we're just going to run a knife down. All of this is going to be stripped up into stir-fry style pieces that I'm going to be using when I do the velveting. So none of that is going to be wasted. None of this is going to be wasted, period. All right, it's just need to do all of the trimming up, which takes a few minutes. Honestly, it does. It just takes a few minutes. And you'll get better the more you do it, the more frequently you do it, the better you become at it. It doesn't need to look beautiful. You do need to get rid of this gelatinous part though. Again, incredibly chewy. So we'll take all that out. Now, I'm not trying to trim this up so it looks perfect like you would find, for example, in a butcher, you would see a beautiful piece of medallion and go, oh, yes, please. Yeah, I'm not going to slice it up and do all that sort of stuff. I am preparing this for the freezer. So these particular pieces that I'm working on now are just getting a good trim. They'll then go into bags and they will be labelled whatever cut it is that they are. Okay, and then, like I said, I've got 4 of these to process. So I just need to work with them as quickly as possible. And then there's another cut completed. Can you see the lovely fillet that it is now? Now this fillet, which it is a lovely fillet of beef, like I said, can be done in medallions. Do I do it in medallions? I will cut it in half because that's okay. Let's just cut it in half so you can see how lovely that is. All right, so very easy to cut these into medallion pieces. Again, I'll put them aside because we'll get to them in a moment. Our next piece. So this is the part of the rump which makes for very good steaks. You can use the whole rump and carve it into steaks if you want really, really big rump steaks. I don't. Once again, removing this silver skin, okay? It just, you cannot get through this. This is where all the tendons are of the animal, and as you're cutting it, you will see that they are the tendons, and that all has to be removed, and the whole layer needs to be removed. Otherwise, you'll be chewing for hours, and no amount of smoking is going to change that, or marinating, or anything is going to change the texture of this connective fibre. So it just has to be removed. So just running your knife down it and it will all come away. Shimples. It gives you a line to follow with your meat as well, which is good. Okay, so I'm just scraping all that meat off it, and then I just end up with a piece of connective tissue. Okay, gone, because you don't want that running through the steaks. This one I'm going to cut into steaks. I was going to do this as a roast, but I have several others that I will do as roast. This one I will do as a rump steak. If I've got enough cap left on it, I'll have to check first when I turn it over. It'll be perfect for velveting. So velveting is a technique used mostly in an Asian style. You will see it in some recipes. If you are looking at some Asian style recipes, they will call for velveting. They may be asking for either oil velveting or water velveting. The difference is just how it's cooked in the end, whether it be cooked with oil or whether it be poached afterwards. Delicate meats like chicken and pork, as well as some seafood, are really good velveted and then water bathed afterwards, and that makes them ultra tender. Beef tends to be done with bicarb because it's, as you can see, it's a tougher cut of meat, so it's not as tender as the other cuts. I'm just going through, running my knife, and see, I can see and feel that piece of connective tissue, which I don't want in here. So I'm just going to remove that as well, and then it's ready to turn into the best strips and fillets. Shimples. Probably took a lot longer to do this than I planned. Alrighty. So if you refrigerate or get this to a really cold temperature, it makes it a lot easier to break this down, to slice it. That's perfect as a roast as it is, rolled and seasoned and roasted just like so. My family love really thin pieces of beef with noodles or steak. And because I've got 4 caps that I can use for steaks, and then it's just knowing which way the grain of your meat is going and cutting. So the grain of this meat is going this way. So if I was velveting, I'd go that way. But if I'm doing steak, I want to go this way. Okay, so you don't cut with the grain of the meat. So looking at it underneath, but if you're looking at it this way, it's a lot more difficult to see which way the meat is running, the grain of the meat is running. I'm just going to trim off that fat down the bottom. I'm going to leave the rest of the fat on the top, that's fine. And I'll just take off that last bit of connective tissue on the top layer, which sits beneath the fat. And then this is all trimmed up, ready to be sliced up. Alrighty, so I work from beneath it so that I can clearly see my lines. All right, so this is the direction that it's in. This is quite a wide piece. I'm going to be velveting this steak. All right, so I need it in smaller amounts. So first thing, I'm going to trim it up. Okay, I'm going to keep all my trimmings. Nothing is getting wasted. That side is fine. It doesn't need it. But I only need a piece about yo big to velvet. So when I freeze this, I'll freeze this beautiful piece of meat for velveting and mark it for velveting, which is a technique that I'll show you soon. Okay, once again, beautiful piece of meat. Again, for velveting that piece. And this piece, I'm going to strip it for strips for marinating and either using on the kebabs or for the noodles. Again, you can clearly see the direction that the meat runs. Okay, you want to go across that and across it and slither it if possible. It's just another way as well to ensure that the meat is nice and tender. The thing about meat is if you cut it correctly, it'll be tender. And if you process it correctly, it'll be tender. If you cut this with the grain and then cook it, it is just, it's not edible. All right, so clearly being able to see the grains, and then I'm just going to quickly sharpen this knife. And then I'm going to lay my piece of meat flat on my board, and I'm going to use my knife on an angle, and I'm just simply going to slice it down. And I'm going to make really thin slices, and these ones are going to go into a container marked for probably turning this into a Korean barbecue beef. Okay, but it can be velveted as well. But it's thin enough. It's a good cut of meat. So all of this will be perfect for stir fries, for example, but slicing it ever so thinly, and it just will melt when a tiny bit of heat has been added to that. Knife skills, mine are terrible. Okay, I always put my finger on the top. Don't ask me why. I think it was from when we were working at Edgel's and we were doing cauliflowers, scooping out semi-trailer loads of cauliflowers and broccoli, and we would use little paring knives, and our hands would just get so sore doing it that it's just always become a habit to have fingers, because this is how we were taught to use our little paring knives. It's just a habit, but always curling up this finger, these hands, to ensure that the knife runs down my fingers this way and I'm not cutting off fingertips. I don't cut fingertips. I think that would be pretty painful. But yeah, if we were at work, when I worked at Edgel's as a teenager, and if we cut ourselves, we were out of job. We were not working. So it was expensive. So we were always taught how to look after ourselves when it came to handling our knives. All right, so that's stir fry. Lovely pieces of stir fry meat. This piece here, I could do a million things with this piece as well, but I will continue with this particular one and just slithering it once again. Again, here's the grain of the meat. We're going to run against it, okay? And we're going to run down on an angle. I just flip my knife. I don't know any other way to say it. I flip my knife so it's laying flat on the meat, and then I lift it up a little bit. I don't know, enough that my fingertips could get underneath it. That's about it. Okay, so it's just on an angle. What's that angle? It's thin is what it is. Ensuring the meat's cut really thin, that's all. And just cutting and letting your knife do all the work for you. That way you won't get fatigued if you're doing a lot of it. This is perfect for jerky. These beautiful little strips are perfect if you're doing jerky. Some of those aside for the hubby, actually. They can go into the smoker really quickly. He's got the barbecue outside. And this piece is a bit wider than the previous one. So these longer pieces, I'll let him have them for tonight's dinner. And then when I get to the shorter end, I'll cut it back the other way. All right, so that's how we process, and I'll come back and show you all the pieces. Radio, after I have broken it all down, this is what we have. Much easier to pack all this away than it is that giant big piece that we started with. So I've got my rump cap, perfect. I've got my medallions. Some of these I've cut up into small pieces. These are perfect for sliders. So nice thin pieces of the beef that's all been trimmed, so nice and healthy. 2 pieces of my medallion or my eye fillets in there now, so I can use them in lots of different ways. I've got my really finely slithered beef, which I'm going to be, it's perfect for stir fry, but I'm going to be velveting that to make it even better. Then I've got some really finely sliced strips as well. Again, very lean. These are going for a quick flash fry on the barbecue this evening. I'll probably marinate those for my husband. And then I have some that has been chopped up into pieces, which will all be cooked later in casserole form. So that's a slow cook braise section of the rump instead. So I have all that, and then I have, so what I'm left with is all of the beef trimmings and the fat, which I'm going to be rendering down, so none of it's going to be wasted. The beef fat, once it's been rendered down, I'm going to put in the refrigerator and chill it, and I'm then going to add that to potatoes or into a roasting pan when I'm cooking up roast beef, for example, or when I'm smoking meat as well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to be separating any leftover pieces of connective tissue and separating that. So this is what we have ended up making when we have broken down our whole roast rump. So it's not so intimidating. It's easy now to package and put into a freezer and have individual meals prepped and marinated, certain ones of these. So I've got some medallion steaks, I've got my rump cap, I've got my strips that I'm going to be turning into a velveted Chinese type dish or an Asian dish, and this is it all packed up easy. So it's not that intimidating. It's taken me about 30 minutes from start to finish to prep my roast. So it's definitely worth the effort to go to purchase a whole roast or a whole rump. Thanks for joining me. Bye now. On to the next part.